three-eye atlas, this interstellar visitor. I think it's a new opportunity. In fact, I told my wife I have to write this paper where I calculated how much material we expect in interstellar space per unit volume and show that we shouldn't expect the delivery of such a giant object once per decade. It should arrive to the inner solar system once per 10,000 years or longer. So there is just not enough material out there. And so it's very surprising. And then it turns out, on that paper, actually, when I submitted it, the editor accepted it for publication within a week after the object was discovered. But the editor insisted that I remove a sentence at the end of the paper. And I basically said in that sentence, either the object is actually much smaller than we think, maybe less than a kilometer in size, or it might have targeted the inner solar system. It should be rare, but then maybe on purpose it arrived. It's not just a random rock on a random trajectory. And so the editor said, then I will not accept it for publication unless you remove that sentence. And I thought to myself, we haven't evolved much since the days of the Vatican, banning Galileo, putting him in house arrest for saying something that they regard as heresy. I mean, this editor was basically using his power just to force me to remove one sentence out of a whole paper. Like, what is the big deal? It's because I'm a rebel, I wrote a full paper following that on the technological option. And that one was published after peer review in a different journal. But the same editor went to the New York Post and said it's nonsense on stilts to consider a technological origin. And I thought it's completely inappropriate, and I still think so. And this editor is also, popularizing science in the UK. And he was joined by Brian Cox recently that said it's nonsense, and also Neil deGrasse Tyson said it's most likely a comet, and the acting.
How do you explain that?
So I explain it very, very simply. These people are not, the Brian Cox and Neil deGrasse Tyson are not practicing science. They are just talking about it. It's like a soccer match where you have players in the field and there are commentators, and obviously the commentators want to be popular, so they say whatever is popular within the audience. And so they feel the direction of the wind. Okay, so they realize, many of the people in the mainstream of science think that it's a comet. I will say that it's a comet. That's basically how they operate. Now I'm a player in the field, and I look at the evidence and I make my judgment and I write scientific papers on the object. So the main difference between me and them is that I can score a goal, they cannot, because they want to be liked. That's the way to understand them. And the problem with wanting to be liked is that you're not close to the truth. And so let me give you an example. There is the dominant theme in theoretical physics over the past 50 years has been string theory, which basically assumes that there are extraspatial dimensions. And we have not seen any evidence for that. Moreover, the theory itself has different versions, and we don't know which one is correct. Moreover, there was never an experimental test, and there is no experimental test of any of these versions in the foreseeable future, so they cannot come up with a way of testing the idea. Nevertheless, it dominates the landscape of theoretical physics. And all the practitioners are doing intellectual or mathematical gymnastics to impress each other. They give each other honors, awards, and so forth. But this is completely speculative. There is no direct evidence for the reality of string theory describing physics. The physical reality that we live in may have nothing to do with string theory. Nevertheless, for 50 years, you have the mainstream doing that. I don't see Brian Cox or Neil deGrasse Tyson saying anything negative about string theory. It's completely speculative. So if they have this gut feeling that they should protect science as always telling the truth to the public about things that were verified and nothing speculative should be considered until it's verified, if that was their motivation, they would say something about string theory. They haven't said it. Why? Because there is a whole community doing it. They want to be popular. Therefore, they will never go against the wind. They will never say anything. And so they just act to represent whatever they see is popular in the environment. They have nothing to do with the truth. And therefore, whatever they say is irrelevant. Okay, so I completely ignore these people because they haven't written a scientific paper in the last decade. Who cares about what they say? They just comment. And it's sort of like an echo of what they hear. And they just put it out. And they are influencers. They have a lot of followers. So they cultivate a culture where people say things that are not necessarily true just because they're popular. Who cares? That's not what science is about. I mean, the idea of Galileo was not popular at the time. But the church in 1992 said Galileo was right. After centuries, 350 years after he died, they admitted he was right. Now, what does it show you? That popularity among humans have nothing to do with the truth. Whether the earth moves around the sun or not has nothing to do with what the Pope said. And in fact, the earth moved 4.5 billion times around the sun before the Vatican even existed. So just imagine the earth going around and around 4.5 billion times, around, 4.5 billion times. And then comes the Vatican and says the sun moves around the earth. Who cares? The earth continues to move around the sun. So the fact that something is popular or something is liked on social media or there is a mainstream within particle physics talking about extra dimensions has nothing to do with the validity of the idea. Maybe extra dimensions do not exist. You haven't verified it experimentally. We don't even have an idea for an experiment in the future that will test it. And so the fact that it's popular is irrelevant. I mean, it's good for mathematics, but may have nothing to do with the physical reality that we live in. I mean, also think about quantum mechanics. Nobody expected it. It came as a shock. And Albert Einstein had a problem with it. And then Niels Bohr, and I visited the Niels Bohr Institute just a few months ago. Niels Bohr said, no, it's a different way to think about reality. And Einstein resisted that. And Niels Bohr was right. So, here is another situation where it was popular to think like Einstein, and then comes evidence for a completely different conception of reality. And all the gadgets that we use, this microphone, the cameras are all based on understanding of quantum mechanics. It's all electronics, quantum mechanics. So we are using a theory, quantum mechanics, that was initially beyond the horizon of the imagination of the very best scientists back then. And so whatever physical reality is has nothing to do with popularity among humans. I don't care what people say. That's completely irrelevant. I don't have any footprint on social media. I don't care what Brian Cox said. It's completely irrelevant. He's not even practicing science, so who cares? My point is, we should look at the evidence. If there are anomalies, we should try to explain them. And it's possible that all the ideas that were contemplated in the past, missed the point. Now, let me just say one more thing. Comet experts, people who claim that they are experts, they are self-declared experts, okay? Comet experts are just like AI systems in the sense that whatever AI systems, artificial intelligence systems are saying, depends on their training data set. You just feed them with some data set, and then they use that to say something. Now, the training data set of comet experts is solar system comets. That's what they've seen in the past. So it's always about icy rocks. Okay, so they are familiar with icy rocks. Anything they see in the sky, they call it an icy rock. On January 2nd, there was a near-Earth object that was classified as an asteroid by the Minor Planet Center. And then a day later, they realized, sorry, this one moves along the path of the Tesla Roadster car that was launched by SpaceX. So it's actually a car, it's not a rock. So sorry, they took it out of the catalog. Yeah. And my point is, we have other objects that we launched to space. These are technological objects. All I'm asking is, let's take these objects and add them to the training data set of comet experts. Why? Because the first interstellar object was ʻOumuamua. Didn't have any cometary features. There was no dust, no gas around it, didn't evaporate, no tail. The experts decided, last year, to call it a dark comet, meaning an object that has non-gravitational acceleration, and you expect from a comet that if it evaporates, but you see no sign of evaporation. So you call it a dark comet, which is an oxymoron. You would call a spacecraft a dark comet because it accelerates without any cometary evaporation. So these people do not have in their training data set technological objects. That's the problem. And all I'm saying is, just add them to your vocabulary. What's the problem? We launched technological objects. When objects arrived into the solar system and look weird, we should consider the possibility. That sounds to me like common sense.
Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to go into the 3i Atlas with current events. And first of all, the explanation that you are giving is that it's alien tech. Am I correct?
No, I'm saying most likely it's a comet of a type that we've never seen before. But I'm saying it could be a technological object because it has some unusual features. Most recently, a lot of jets were seen coming from it. And these could be thrusters, for example, because some of the jets are pointing towards the sun, some away from the sun. Very, very different behavior than the comets we're used to. But at any event, my point is that we must consider this possibility because of the huge implications to humanity. This is called the black swan event. I always give the example of October 7th because the intelligence agencies were dismissing the possibility of an attack. And, because of that, they didn't notice the anomalies in the data. And whereas for science that deals with subjects that have no implications to Earth, like, for example, you consider a galaxy billions of light years away, no implications to our daily life. That's the right approach. You say, at the 99% confidence, I think this galaxy is of this type and so forth. If you are wrong, nothing bad happens. However, when you have a visitor to your backyard that could be a potential threat to humanity, even if 1%, if it has some anomalies that make it a potential technological object at 1% confidence, you must take it seriously because the implications are huge. You multiply a small probability by huge implications, you must take it, meaning you have to collect as much data as possible, and you shouldn't ridicule the discussion. This is a completely new reality that we didn't face in the past, and the scientists are slow to understand that.
Okay, so you have given an explanation that I really wanted to go into even later about Galileo Galilei and the way that the scientific approach has been attacked throughout history.
Throughout history,
many times.
There is nothing new.
This is how it goes. So, but I want to stay on 3i Atlas because I think the scientific community is. I don't know if they know what it is when they're speaking about it with a lot of confidence.
The less you
but
know,
also
the more,
the public.
The less you know about the object, the easier it is for you to say, "Oh, it's probably just a comet."
Yeah.
And
so people don't know about it.
Yeah. So the anomalies of this object. First, I mentioned the size. If it ends up being very big, that's very unusual because you would expect smaller objects first. A lot of them. But the second thing is that it moves in the plane of the planets around the sun. This is called the ecliptic plane. And it's within 5 degrees of the orbital plane of the Earth around the sun. And the chance of that happening at random, we did simulations with my student where we launched interstellar objects from stars in the Milky Way galaxy, and you see them coming from all directions relative to the solar system. And the chance of finding one that is exactly aligned with the ecliptic plane of the planets around the sun is 1 in 500. And this is the third object from interstellar space. So, it's less than 1% chance that it would be aligned like that. Mm-hmm. But if it's on a reconnaissance mission, it would like to spend as much time as possible near the planet. So that's what it's doing. It came close to Mars. It will come close to Jupiter. Mm-hmm. So that's the second anomaly. And then, there are many others. For example, it had a glow in the direction of the sun. It's called an anti-tail. Whereas usually dust and gas get pushed away from the sun by the solar radiation and the solar wind.
Yeah. Isn't it moving incredibly fast as well?
It's also, moving faster than previous ones, but not unheard of for stars.
But what of all the anomalies? What they are saying to you that it's probably someone sent it This is
No, so I'm saying
That
it's
this the
unlikely to have
possibility.
this orbit, and the critics are saying, yeah, but rare things do happen sometimes.
Oh, this is the explanation?
Well, that's for this one. Someone tried to say, oh, maybe if it comes from the disk of the Milky Way galaxy, you would expect it to be aligned with the plane of the planets. No, the two planes are misaligned by 60 degrees. That's a big angle.
Yeah.
And in fact, we see the other interstellar objects coming at some large angles. That means they are spending a very short amount of time near the planets. This one, by the way, is a great gift because it's bright, it's big, but it's also moving in the plane of the planet. So we have all the observatories on Earth and elsewhere. We have orbiters around Mars. We have an orbiter around Jupiter. So there are lots of spacecraft that monitor it, as well as telescopes. So it gives us an excellent opportunity. If we could anticipate it, we would have potentially invested in an interceptor that would have visited it.
Yeah, Elon Musk said recently that even if it's like an attack, we are not prepared for something like that at all. Yeah,
not at all. Because that's my main point, that we have not thought about it. The Congress tasked NASA in 2005 to find all objects bigger than a football field, or more than 90% of them, that may collide with Earth, that come close to Earth. And so that's why these survey telescopes like Pan-STARRS in Hawaii or the Rubin Observatory now, or Atlas, were constructed in order to find near-Earth objects. And in the process of surveying the sky, they found the interstellar objects. And so it's not a coincidence that we are now finding those, but it's for the wrong reason. We were, in the past, worried about rocks colliding with Earth because that's what killed the dinosaurs, an asteroid the size of Manhattan Island that 66 million years ago created the catastrophe. And so we don't want even a smaller catastrophe,
Tunguska, right?
Yeah, so we want to deflect objects that may be of a risk. And so NASA has this plan to deflect them, for example, by colliding a spacecraft with the incoming object. You just need to deflect it a little bit as long as it's far away, so it will miss the Earth. So we can do something about it. But what do you do about alien technology? That's much more complicated because it may actually maneuver, or you just cannot forecast the intent of that. And that was never contemplated. There is no protocol, no discussion about it. And I submitted a white paper along with two Israelis, Omer Eldadi and Gershon Tenenbaum, to the United Nations as well as the International Astronomical Union to encourage them to establish a committee or an organization that would coordinate observations of interstellar objects in the future and alert policymakers about those that look potentially technological. I invented a scale between 0 and 10, where 0 is natural objects and 10 might, alien technologies that are a threat to humanity. This is now called the Loeb scale, and I gave ʻOumuamua and 3i Atlas for different reasons a rank of 4 on that scale. But in the future, I think it's really important to attend to this. But nobody would pay attention. I'm not dreaming. I realize that only when we have a real encounter beyond any doubt with a technological object from another civilization, only after that encounter, our politicians and the financial sector would respond to that. And let's hope that we would survive the first encounter. Yeah. That's the issue.
Yeah.
And I think it's completely reasonable to be aware of that potential risk.
Yeah.
And I just had a television interview on Fox News, and I was told that it's likely that the President Trump was informed about 3i Atlas and.
From those reasons, because it probably could be something that is a threat.
So the point of view of NASA right now, and maybe they're saying it to the public to prevent any panic, is that this is definitely a comet. That's what they say. And I'm just saying, indeed, it's most likely to be a comet, but let's just collect as much data as possible about it. So my point is, of course, the president needs to be aware of anything that looks unusual heading our way, because for a simple reason that, the public would lose confidence in governments if there is some kind of a threat from the sky, and the financial markets will react. So just like in any other situation which poses a risk, we need to contemplate, have some protocol of how to respond to it, how to convey the message.
Yeah.
So I hope this will be attended to before we actually have a definite visit. But as of now, it never happened.
Yeah. So how confident are you that if we had a visitor, it would be peaceful versus violent?
Not at all. I mean, so even though I met my wife on a blind date, this is a blind date of interstellar proportions. And you can have a situation like the Trojan horse where something looks completely innocent, and then it potentially brings a threat. If 3i Atlas is a mothership, it could release probes that would visit. So it could continue on its path, and it may look like a comet, just so that nobody would suspect that it has any technology interior to it. But at the same time, it may release probes that we will have a hard time detecting if they are within the Earth-Sun separation and have a size of order 10 meters. All the probes that we launched are less than 10 meters, of order 10 meters or less. And we would not be able to detect them with our current telescopes unless they come very close to Earth. Mm-hmm. So what I asked my research team to do, I'm leading the Galileo Project. We have 3 observatories. The most recent one was constructed on the Sphere in Las Vegas, by the way, and the owner of the Sphere, that's the biggest entertainment center in the world. He came to my home a year ago and asked, his name is Jim Dolan, and he asked me to build an observatory on top of it. So if you fly above it, you would see it's like a freckle on top of the Sphere. And so I told my research team to check if there's any unusual activity in the coming months, close to Earth. And also I advised NASA to check if there is, using the cameras on their rovers and orbiters around Mars, to check if there is any unusual objects that showed up. But, it's all a matter of checking. I don't think there is any reason for an alarm but I do think that we should not ridicule that possibility, the way that some astronomers get really furious about discussing this possibility. And, it's because they never included that in their training data set.
Yeah, but I noticed something about you, the way you think, and perhaps it gives you a lot of credit in your scientific approach, which is asking questions. You don't give any disclaimers.
No,
axioms.
But that's the way science is done.
Yeah.
And the problem is, I can give you many examples where scientists thought they know the answer in advance and therefore missed a discovery. For example, in 1952, there was an astronomer called Otto Struve that wrote a paper saying right now we can search for Jupiter-like planets that are close to a star like the Sun, because they would move the star back and forth, or they would transit the star, so we would see a deficit in the flux from the star, in the brightness of the star. So he suggested looking for those, but the astronomy community just completely ignored it, because they said, we know that why Jupiter is so far from the Sun. That's where the water ice forms, and therefore it would be a waste of telescope time to search for such systems.
Yeah, but in terms of like the question of are we alone in general, how do you approach it with questioning?
Very simply. You can easily tell the difference between a rock and a spacecraft, either if you take a close-up photograph, or if you see artificial lights, or if you see a maneuver that cannot be explained by cometary evaporation. So my point is, let's open this range of possibilities and then search for any deviation from what we expect from a rock. Okay, so if we don't find any deviation, if it behaves like a rock, it's just like quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, then it's a duck. But we should check, because if we assume that this near-Earth asteroid is a rock and it turns out to be a car, we're missing the point. And we should not make that mistake about functioning devices, because they could be a potential threat. We don't know how much traffic of those things there is.
Yeah. Which is fascinating by itself. But if I go take a zoom out to the only question of are we alone in general? Where do you stand?
I think it's very likely that. If you read the news every day, it's clear that we are not very intelligent because we're wasting a lot of resources, most of our effort in conflicts on this earth. And that's not a sign of intelligence, because we're wasting resources. Each of us lives for, let's say, at best around a century. And nevertheless, we focus our attention and time on either shortening the lifespan of other people or preventing them from shortening yours. That's what we are doing. And that sounds ridiculous, because all of us will die in a century from now. We will not be around, so why waste our time and effort in killing each other? That I just cannot understand. It shows lack of intelligence. Now, we have enough resources for everyone to be happy in principle if we were to cooperate. But instead, that's what we do, and look at each other on the surface of this rock that we were born on, and divide territories as if they are amazingly important. But this is just a piece of rock, 3 millionths of the mass of the sun left over from the formation of the sun. There is another rock next to us called Mars. And we think that the biggest vision that we can have is to go to Mars, like another rock, which actually is a desert, much worse than the rock that we inhabit, rather than venture to the stars. There's so much real estate out there. There are 100 billion stars. Probably many of them hosted things like us billions of years ago, and those civilizations may have perished because they were engaged in conflicts just like we are.
So you do say that it's in nature of intelligence to fight.
Well, no, I'm saying that the Darwinian principle of survival of the fittest, if you extend that to the Milky Way galaxy, it means that only those that realize that they should leave their rock into space are remembered in the history of the Milky Way galaxy. So if someone writes the history book of the Milky Way galaxy, which would be the characters in that book? I don't think we will be mentioned because most likely we would destroy ourselves within a short period of time relative to the age of the cosmos. Maybe we will survive for thousands of years, but I find it hard to see. We are in a very unstable political situation all the time. So I find it hard to believe that we will survive, more than 1 million years into the future.
Two things,
but the point is, if we were smart enough to build a space platform, so right now we invest $2.4 trillion in military budgets worldwide. If we were to say, okay, let's allocate a fraction of that. Because we had an interstellar visitor, now we realize there are threats from outside. So let's put $1 trillion a year on building an infrastructure of defending the Earth. And therefore, we would also explore space. So we would build a space platform where humans can go for a long journey. And if you put $1 trillion a year, that's a lot of money, and put the best architects, the best engineers, the best scientists on this project, we will be able to leave the Earth, at least a fraction of us, leave the Earth on a journey to the stars. Okay,
the rich people.
And the point is that this journey would be the only monument in the long term that is left from us. And if anyone writes the history book of the Milky Way, only the civilizations that embarked on interstellar journeys are the ones to be remembered, because the others were wiped out on the surface of a planet. So, planets are being swallowed by stars, destroyed by exploding stars, all kinds of catastrophes. We are not even aware of that, but there were lots of tragedies. If you ask, where is everybody about civilization, the question that Enrico Fermi asked, the answer is most of them are dead. Because if you look at the humans on Earth, there were 117 billion humans. Right now, there are 8 billion, so where is everybody? They died. Okay, so the same is true about civilizations that existed billions of years before us. Then we come along on this rock and we say, oh, we might be at the top of the food chain, yet we spend our time killing each other. And I say, well, first of all, that's not very intelligent. Surely there is something better than us, that survived much longer. And let's open our eyes and look for it. And what do I get in return? Oh, that's ridiculous. This is a complete speculation. We don't care that string theorists speculate. We care about you speculating about things like us out there. And I say, this is completely reasonable to consider. Like, what's the problem with that? We have a problem not even recognizing that we are not at the top of the food chain, but also not searching for better students in our class. To me, it's a sign of lack of intelligence. So one reason I'm seeking intelligence in interstellar space is because I don't often find it here on Earth.
Oh, yeah, but the two things, if I may, two things.
Yeah.
First of all, you said that about Elon Musk and you didn't mention perhaps his name, but going to Mars is a venture towards Mars.
Yeah, but
do you think it's not the right way to become interstellar?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Mars.
And just the other thing, if I may, that you said that. The thing about the way scientific theory is revealing stuff to us, I think that the Vikings, for example, or even Columbus and his expeditions to here, suggest something about the way of life exists, which is your place is getting destroyed or something, and then you look out to the horizon to look for something else. So I think that in your answer before, this is what you may think that other civilizations have experienced, and because of that
not necessarily. It depends on their intent. It could have been that they realized that there is much more. They got the big picture and they want to then spread out. And just because it's a wasted space if you don't represent yourself in the bigger region. Yeah. And the question is whether to endeavor into other places. You want necessarily biological creatures. It's not clear. You might use AI. We haven't used AI in space as of yet. But in principle, it allows you to make long journeys without the AI getting bored. And also you can make the hardware resilient to the harsh conditions in space. You might not need to feed it except for electric power that can be generated by some energy source, and that's it. So
Space Odyssey comes to mind.
Sorry?
If you know the movie Space Odyssey comes to mind, which is the AI goes with them in an expedition and kills the entire crew.
Yeah, but it may well be that no biological creature will actually be on the to start with, because it makes more sense to use AI in long journeys. And so by the way, I think nature is far more imaginative than script writers in Hollywood. And I met some of those people actually just a few months ago. But the point is that we might be inspired to do all of that when we have a visitor. So that's another big benefit to considering interstellar objects as potential technological artifacts, because if any of them is, then it will change our aspirations for space. So aside from maybe bringing us to a mindset where we change priorities and not fight with each other, maybe cooperate and realize we have a neighbor, and also recognize the neighbor may be more accomplished than we are. So then it might inspire us to embark into space just like the neighbor.
Yeah, that's fascinating to think if they have other motives to explore than us.
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
Yeah.
But I do think, so I had a visit by some religious scholars that asked me whether finding extraterrestrials will change their religious beliefs. And I said, when I have two daughters, and when the second one was born, it didn't take away any of my love to the first one. So imagining that God can be only a parent that can attend to one child is very limiting. And in fact, why would you lose your religious beliefs? Maybe there are many siblings in our family. And the only thing that would be a problem for you is if one of your siblings is more accomplished, you might be jealous. But so they accepted that. It doesn't violate their religious beliefs. I mean, obviously.
And even Newton and many others were very religious people.
Yeah. But on the, it may give us back a sense of awe if there is a technological species far more advanced than we are, because, when the modern age of science and technology started dominating, Friedrich Nietzsche said God is dead in 1882, and in fact, finding a very intelligent alien species might be a substitute to God, in the sense that there would be a superhuman entity that we can't fully understand, but it has much better qualities than humans, much more accomplished than you, can achieve things, and potentially is like a God figure for humanity. There are lots of potential implications for our future if we find it. And some people might be scared and say, better not to think about it. But, you can't bury your head in the sand. If we have a neighbor, we better know about it. Suppose you live in a house and you keep telling your family, we are the only ones on this street. There is nobody. Don't worry about it. And then the family members say, we see a lot of microbes at home. Therefore, probably there are microbes in the other houses on the street that we can see from the window. And they say, we will put $10 billion to look for those microbes because that's the most important thing. Indeed, having another intelligent being on the street is unlikely. We don't want to discuss it. And we will basically destroy any scientist who is suggesting that we look for other intelligent residents in the street. And then they build this huge instrument to detect the signatures of microbes in the houses on the street. And you realize, wait a minute, I see someone, walking on the street, and you want to tell them about it, but they say, no, it's just, it's not a resident. It's just, some natural phenomena, forget about it. We don't want to discuss it. Let's bury. That will not remove the neighbor. The fact that they ignore it, the fact that they put zero funding to look for the neighbor, and they want to just be obsessed with microbes and not allow a discussion on the possibility that someone may be visiting, not allow a discussion on that. I mean, I just find that really mind-boggling, because it's common sense. Public supports science. Public cares about it. We should listen to the public.
Yeah. First of all, I wanted to complete this thing with Elon Musk, if you can.
Sure. So I think Elon Musk is not the most accomplished space entrepreneur since the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago. I think it's very likely there was a more accomplished space entrepreneur in the Milky Way galaxy, despite, he may think that he is the most accomplished, but I don't think it's likely. I think, given the 100 billion stars, or 10 billion Earth-Sun systems, there were many more accomplished than Elon Musk in those. And therefore, let's check if they sent any cars similar to the Tesla Roadster or much better than that. But going to Mars, it's just another rock that happens to be carry much worse conditions than Earth. So what's the big deal of going there? Like, I think we should build a space platform that would accommodate humans or whatever we want. If we want to send AI, accommodate AI systems, but focus on platforms that we design that can provide the conditions that are suitable for life or for AI systems that we want to send. And then it will have a flexible position. It doesn't need to be at a particular distance from the sun. It can have its own power supply from a nuclear reactor, for example. And if we were to consider that as, a huge challenge that we invest $1 trillion a year in, I think we can do it by the end of this century.
Really? But I think if I go into his mind, if it's, I think that if you put your businessman hat on, it's okay. Going to Mars, I think that it's the only thing that he can accomplish in his lifetime. If you understand what I get.
Yeah, but that's irrelevant because think long term. His lifetime is not so important in this context. What will benefit humanity? Going to the moon or going to Mars, okay, you can perhaps first demonstrate superiority technologically relative to other nations, or, so he claims that it would save, humanity will not be at risk of getting completely demolished if we were to spread ourselves. But frankly, the conditions are so bad on Mars that, it's like a suicide mission going there. Just because there is very little atmosphere, your body is bombarded by cosmic rays that you need to protect yourself. And there are temperature variations of hundreds of degrees, between day and night. Like, this is crazy. Mm-hmm. So it's much better to build a whole habitat. Now, Elon Musk is worth maybe $1 trillion right now. I'm saying if we invest $1 trillion, his own worth every year in the coming decades. And you might say, oh, that's a huge amount of money. Well, it's not so huge because we are spending it on military budgets, right? So it's just a change in priorities. So whatever Elon Musk says has the value of 1 year of investment that I'm talking about, okay? So I don't think with that kind of investment, it's the right priority. Now, how will we change our priorities to invest $1 trillion a year in space? If we discover that there is a potential threat from alien technology, then we would need to build the infrastructure that defends Earth. You will need to put interceptors and sensors, around the inner solar system that would approach any incoming threat and take a close-up photograph and inform us whether it's a rock or something else, searching for anomalies in the way that these objects behave. And so that would cost a lot of money. And once our attention would be not just on fighting each other on Earth, but let's say half of that budget will go to space instead of killing each other, that's not such a, it doesn't sound to me like a ridiculous possibility. Then every year we'll invest the amount of money that Elon Musk has right now. Okay, his entire net worth every year. So what he thinks about going to Mars is, is okay, that would be a milestone, but it's not really the obvious step forward for humanity. The obvious step forward is to maintain a base, a platform that you can go anywhere you want and that is self-sustained. You have everything you need in it. You can produce gravity by spinning, so you have the centrifugal force as artificial gravity. You can have all the nutrients by having some agriculture within that big space. So it might need to be the size of a city, okay? The size of 3i Atlas. And that's what the science fiction writers already thought about, like Arthur C. Clarke in his book Rendezvous with Rama. He's talking about tens of kilometers spacecraft. But whether we can do it or not depends on how much effort we invest. And
so
I think it's doable in principle.
Going back to 3i Atlas, Elon Musk says he thinks that it probably is something that's sent from someone. Do you think that someone as big as he can influence the scientific mainstream ideas?
I think it's up to the data to convince everyone, not so much people telling other people. So
what they think it is,
So once we have clear evidence for something that behaves in a way that we cannot explain as a natural object, then everyone would jump to the bandwagon, and people like Brian Cox would say, "Oh yeah, of course. This we thought about it a long time ago, and everyone was talking about it. There are all kind of science fiction writers. You can find papers in the literature that talked about it. Of course, it's an obvious idea." And Avi Loeb was not the first to say that, and he's not particularly significant. And what he said is not really relevant because at the time when he said that, there wasn't enough evidence. And so let's forget about him. This was an idea that I embraced and many others embraced.
Yeah.
By the way, to me, it's irrelevant, because it's not about me or about any individual. It's more about the future of humanity and the significance of such an object. And my real goal is to bring it to the mainstream, to the center of discussion, such that we would change, priorities in science as to, instead of being obsessed just with microbes, also looking for siblings, entities that are similar to us, that produced space objects, and search for them. And as of now, the SETI community decided to ban any discussion about objects near Earth that might be technological. They banned it. But, just a few months ago, many of them came together and wrote a scientific paper saying, if we find technological signatures of interstellar objects, that's a very nice way of learning about extraterrestrial technological civilization. So they want to, on the one hand, suppress discussion about real examples, but at the same time claim that they were the ones to think about it to start with, which I think is a bit disingenuous. Again, I don't mud wrestle. I don't, if people attack me, I just ignore that because I don't want to get dirty. I just want to, for me, science is more like a chess play rather than a mud wrestling event.
Yeah, but how does it feel, if I may, to be critiqued for your opinions on this matter?
So I'm trying to change the conversation, and I have a lot of interest from the public and also from Congress people, and it seems to me that people take it seriously because the idea makes sense. Okay, so whether the scientific community adapts to it right now or later, I don't care, because eventually, the point is that if we don't seek the evidence, we might not realize what we're missing, right? So one way for the mainstream of science many times to avoid discovering things is by saying, we don't need to look for the evidence because it's very likely to be this or that, and therefore let's forget about collecting evidence because we know the answer already. And the experts are telling you, and how dare you even suggest something if you are not an expert in this field? And if you are an expert in this field, then you would be very careful and worried about risking your status by getting into a confrontation with other people who are claiming that it's nothing and you should forget about it. So everyone is lined up. The herd is very tight, in a tight configuration. Everyone is going along the beaten path. Nobody deviates. Nobody suggests. And, progress in science is therefore suppressed under these circumstances. So as far as I'm concerned, I just want to broaden the conversation and say, look, it's okay to search for microbes, but we have here an opportunity to search for technological signatures we've never had before. Now with the Rubin Observatory in Chile that will potentially find with a 3.2 gigapixel camera a new interstellar object every few months. It's a new era where we can find many of them and study them. And let's hope that the scientists would be sufficiently open. Or I'm even happy if they were to say, oh, that's nonsense. Let's demonstrate that, in fact, the data is not consistent with anything other than an icy rock. And if they do that, eventually, if they collect enough data and it is not an icy rock, it's something else, we would know it. The worst that can happen is them saying it must be an icy rock. We don't need more data, as happened with ʻOumuamua.
Some people do say it.
Yeah, they say it, but the way I see it is that they are anti-science, because science should be based on evidence, and you can't claim that you understand something unless you collect as much information about it as possible. To me, it's the sincerest form of loving nature. If you really care about something like nature, you want to know everything about it. When you love a person, the sincerest form of love is that you want to know everything about that person. However, if you think that you know already the person without even speaking to them, or you want your image to stay because whenever they will give you more information, that image will be tainted in your mind, then you don't really love that person. You love something that you imagine that person to be.
Yeah.
And that's true also for relationships. There are many people who prefer to stick with an image of another person. They're sometimes willing to kill a person just because of what they read on social media. There are bullets being fired right now because some people think that the other person, based on what they read in social media, is evil. And so they kill that person. And they have never spoken to that person. It reminds me, my grandfather was in Germany, and he fought in the First World War on the side of the Germans against the French. And in a famous battle called Verdun, where he was in the mud for more than a year, and he was among the survivors of that. Hundreds of thousands of people died, and the borderline didn't move much, nothing. So it was just
for nothing.
Yeah. Anyway, then he came back, and then in 1935 there was a gathering in his village, and a member of the Nazi party stood up and said, the Jews are using up our society and we should do something about it. And my grandfather stood up and said, how dare you say that, because you dodged the draft in the First World War, and you were a communist at the time, and I fought for Germany. And so the other guy said, yes, we all know about you, Mr. Loeb. I'm talking about the other Jews. Now, what does that suggest? It suggests that this member of the Nazi party had no issue with the only Jew he knows closely being a very respectful German. However, those that he didn't know are the ones using up the German society. So it's very easy to hate people as long as you don't know them. That's a prerequisite. And if you know them, if you actually interact with people, you cannot hate them because they are multifaceted usually. There are always serial killers, But I'm talking about the vast majority of humanity.
Yeah. So we said before about Galileo Galilei that he had the same attack because of his opinions. I don't know if it's the same, but I do feel like I'm talking, live in this era with someone in this in his shoes at least. So I just want to know how does it feel to be by peers, by people I share your critic towards them, but It's your community in the end.
Well, the people who know me, for example, at Harvard, or I had maybe 50 students and hundreds of postdocs, and that I worked with, and all these people that I wrote more than 1,000 scientific papers with, they know me, and I haven't changed, and they don't have any issue. But the ones that attack me are people who don't know me. Okay, and so. When ʻOumuamua was discovered to have non-gravitational acceleration, and I wrote a paper trying to explain it with an Israeli postdoc, Shmuel Bialy, that just came at the time to Harvard as my postdoc. We submitted the paper for publication. Within 3 days, it was accepted, and the reviewer said, this is an excellent paper, and in fact there is data to support it. And then I went to Germany to a conference, the Falling Walls in Berlin, and because my paper came out and was of great interest, there was a huge amount of media interest, and so they couldn't let all the reporters speak with me individually, and they put all of them in a room, and that was 2018. And so I entered the room, and then a journalist from Italy shouted from the back of the room. She said, "Do you think you are Galileo?" And I said, "No, I don't. I'm not thinking that I'm Galileo. I'm just saying, there is this object. It looks weird. We should pay attention to it. Maybe it's technological." So there is some, and frankly, I feel connected to Galileo because about 15 years ago, I visited the Pisa, the Scuola Normale Superior gave me a honor of Cathedra Galileana, where I was asked to give 4 lectures in the name of Galileo. And so, I felt connected. And also the name Galileo is derived from the Galilee in northern Israel, the country I was born in. So I do feel connected in other ways in addition to, but I don't like to view myself as a victim. You see, I don't care. I should be able to survive those attackers, those critics. I think many of them just want to get to the limelight by attacking me. So, when you have a big whale swimming in the ocean, there are often small fish that are feeding off the whale. So it's part of the public attention that I get, that I will have haters around me that are saying bad things.
Yeah, but just like Galileo, there's like a place in folklore for people who have been attacked and then discovered that they were right all along.
Right, but I'm not in a house arrest. I'm not worried too much.
Oh yeah.
But I should say that in recent days, I can give you a few anecdotes. Well, first of all, there is a sculptor in New York City that was inspired by my work and decided to donate 2 bronze sculptures of Galileo Galilei to my office. He's the most accomplished. He's the American Rodin. His name is Greg Wyatt, and he gave 2 sculptures of Galileo that are in my office right now. And just a few days ago, we unveiled them to the public. And then 51 watercolors of scientists that he, again, made and donated to my office. So my office is now a mini museum. Also, there was a car racer in the NASCAR car race that took place a few weeks ago that decided to put my image on the hood of his car. So I went there together with the Netflix team because they are doing a documentary about my research that should come out in 2026. They've been following me for 3 years now. And also, in addition to that, and then our dishwasher broke down just a few days ago, and I had to order a new dishwasher. So I called the company, and some random service person answers, and I say I would like to get a new dishwasher, and he says, "Is this Avi Loeb? I've been following you everywhere on podcasts and television and so forth." So I didn't even mention my name. He immediately recognized my voice. I go to the woman who cuts my hair, the barber, the following day, and she says, the boss of my daughter introduced your recent podcast with Joe Rogan to my daughter, and she said, well, my mom actually cuts his hair. And he said, are you sure that your mom cuts the hair of Avi Loeb? And then... we go to a restaurant and the server recognizes me. And so it got to a point where, there are millions around the world that know about what I'm doing. And basically, I don't have any footprint on social media. I don't go out of my home much. I'm just writing essays, writing scientific papers, and this level of publicity is really unheard, unprecedented. I get hundreds of emails where I need to read them. It takes me hours every day, and it's coming from mostly Gmail addresses. And since if I were to respond to each and every one, then they would respond again to me, and I'll have more. So I have to not only not answer, but also block after I answer those Gmail addresses, because I just cannot cope with it. It keeps every day a few hundred. It will rise to hundreds of thousands within several months, and I just cannot deal with that. I mean, I can get an AI agent maybe to respond. But it's really quite unusual. And, I get invited to all kinds of events. There was a gathering a few months ago where there were the most accomplished actors in Hollywood there, and the most accomplished CEOs. at the break, there was a cocktail. I noticed that Margot Robbie is standing not far, but I had no way of initiating a conversation. There is nothing for me to offer, but then someone came with a book for me to sign, and she noticed it and came over and said, "Are you Avi Loeb? I really wanted to hear what you're doing because I have to go to a wedding and I'll miss your talk." And so we spoke for 20 minutes, and then Adrian Brody came over and said that he always wanted to be a scientist. And after I gave the talk, Jerry Bruckheimer, a very famous Hollywood director, came to me immediately and said, "I just finished F1, the movie, the film, and I'm now making a new film about a scientist, just like yourself, that is searching for unidentified anomalous phenomena." And so anyway, I get to meet a lot of people that I've never been exposed to. And
why do you think this publicity is coming towards you? Because
in that, so for example, in some of those cases, it's the fact that I had a TED talk a year ago that went well, even though I didn't sleep the night before. They kept telling us to practice, and I didn't practice at all. It's just that the night before I said, okay, what are the things that I want to convey in the talk? And then I didn't sleep that night and gave the talk. And apparently people connected to the TED talk. And so as a result of that, some people that heard it contacted me afterwards. There was publicity.
Yeah, and of course, there also Joe Rogan.
And now Joe Rogan and so forth. And so it feeds from each of these public events generates awareness.
What many people are getting the spotlight, but why you are making the waves that you say?
I think maybe because the way I speak appeals to people. It makes sense. They sort of identify themselves in the way and they notice some authenticity in it. However, of course, the biggest force in academia is jealousy, and that's why some people in academia, when they see this public attention, they immediately attack, and they want to suppress that, and they write blog posts or make YouTube videos that try to say negative things about me, even though they've never met me. But so I think the appeal comes from, first of all, I'm understandable, and the reason for that is I grew up on a farm in Israel, and I was very much connected to nature, and I was interested in the big questions, the big picture, and therefore I wanted to become a philosopher. But because I had to serve in the military, I was recruited to a program called Talpiot, where I pursued a degree in physics and mathematics and got it at age 24. So I was in the second year of the project, Talpiot, and I basically created a path that did not exist. I said that I want to do research because that was the closest I can get to philosophy. I didn't want to serve, to run in the fields with a machine gun or to develop weapons within the military or do something like that. So it turned out that at the time there was the Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars, that President Reagan initiated in the mid-1980s. And the head of that program came to visit Israel, General Abramson. And I presented the project along with an experimentalist to General Abramson. He loved it. And then we were the first international project that was funded by Star Wars, Strategic Defense. And so I went, we got a few $1 million a year for the time that I had, after my bachelor's degree. And I finished my PhD during that time and led the theoretical part of the project, and also visited Washington. And in one of the visits, I was someone, a very accomplished physicist, very prominent physicist, suggested that I visit Princeton, the Institute for Advanced Study. And I went... at the end of one of the trips to Washington, I went there for a day. They barely allowed me to show up. I had 11 publications at that time. I was about to finish my PhD. And then the administrator there said that there is only one person here that has free time. His name is Freeman Dyson. And I said, wow, that's amazing. I would love to meet with him because I recognize his name from textbooks. And I spoke with him, and he said, there is a faculty member called John Bakal who works in astrophysics. He's married to an Israeli. Would you like to meet him? And I said, sure. And he called John, and John arranged lunch. If John was not there on that day, then, I would not be in astrophysics. But then he invited me for a month and offered me a 5-year fellowship under the condition that I'll switch to astrophysics from what I was doing. I did my PhD in plasma physics. So, a year later, I came to Princeton and had to study all the vocabulary of astrophysics. So I had to build myself up because I couldn't refuse such an offer, 5-year fellowship at the place where Einstein was faculty a few decades earlier. And then Harvard was looking for a junior faculty, and nobody wanted that job because it has, in fact, they offered it to someone who declined it because the prospects for tenure are very small. So I took it because, they ended up offering it to me, and I said, sure, because I could always go back to the farm, and I had plan B. I had job security. But then Cornell ended up making me a tenured offer after 3 years of being at Harvard. So Harvard responded and offered me tenure within, 3 years after I arrived there. Usually it's 7 years. And so I ended up being tenured at Harvard in astrophysics. It was an arranged marriage, but I realized that I'm married to my true love because I can address philosophical questions, the big questions, using the scientific method. And so I'm not like a typical scientist. I think differently. The way I think about it is, when you build a building, you need those who put the bricks, the workers. But you also need, before you do that, an architect that defines the questions that need to be, or defines the structure of the building, the architecture. Because otherwise you can put bricks and get something really, not well designed and not functional, right? And so most scientists are able to very well put bricks on top of each other and follow a path that is defined for them. So if there is a mainstream consensus about what needs to be done, they would do it. Now, sometimes in the context of string theory, for example, they are told that they need to put bricks in a particular pattern, but it's not clear whether it will lead them, to any beautiful building, because maybe nature has nothing to do with it. Yeah. But to me, it's most important to think about the big picture. And if there is, for example, a missed opportunity that scientists should address, that's what I'm here for. So I started studying the first stars, the first galaxies in the universe, and now back then there was nobody interested. When I started at Harvard University, that was my focus. And I had 8 students every year working on things related, and some of them are very prominent now, including Daniel Eisenstein. He was the chair of the astronomy department after me. I was 9 years and he followed me. He was my first student, actually. Anyway, I defined new frontiers, like the study of the first galaxies, the first stars, which is now very fashionable with the Webb telescope. So I started it several decades ago. But with respect to interstellar objects, I feel similarly that it's a frontier that needs to be within the mainstream that was not yet recognized. And for me, it's a standard practice of not caring that other people are not involved in it right now.
It's very interesting the way you said that you were interested in philosophy, and that's what got you into the big questions.
Yeah.
And I think this is also what makes you understandable. You are very going to the basic,
and I'm not different than the common person because I am a common. I'm just. I was privileged to stay curious. The problem with many kids is that they become adults and then they are worried about their reputation, and so they don't take risks and they become very boring. That's why adults are very boring. Kids are always do exciting things, and my privilege is that I maintain my childhood curiosity. I haven't changed much since the time I was a child. I sort of protected myself from social media. So I'm not, the thing about social media that I often say, it's like when you go to the beach and you find the seashells, the different types of seashells. There are those that were on the beach for a long time and they rub against each other as a result of the waves, pushing them around, and they lose their color. eventually, all these seashells. The ones that are relatively young, the seashells they have beautiful colors. And so the same thing is true about life. If you rub against other people all day long, in social media or otherwise, you lose your colors. And so I somehow managed to avoid that. And I treasure that. And now, I'm in the best part of my life because I have the job security of a tenured professor, and I have a long experience of 1,000 scientific papers. I was chair of the astronomy department, director of two institutes, the Black Hole Initiative and the Institute for Theory and Computation at Harvard, the chair of the board on physics and astronomy of the National Academy. So I have a lot of leadership positions. I also have a perspective about how science is done, and I don't really care what Brian Cox says. I really know how science is done, And I'm also, I jog every morning at sunrise. I'm in good health. I eat well. I'm married to an amazing woman. And so if you put all of these together, I have now the best time of my life of being able to create, because I finished my leadership positions, allowing me to go back to the trenches and do what I really am passionate about. All these leadership positions that I was in were service to other people around me, just to allow them to fulfill their potential. So I tried to bring excellent people as department chair to Harvard Astronomy Department so that we will have the best department in the world, okay? And to bring excellent postdocs, excellent students. But it took a toll on my time. And now when I'm relieved from these duties, I can pursue my creative work like I've never done, with all the experience I have. So it's amazing. It's like I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, and what do you think is the future in this
I think the best is yet to come. That's the way I think about life. When the two sculptures and the 51 watercolors were donated to my office by Greg Wyatt, I told my administrator, I said, get rid of all the file cabinets. So I had huge file cabinets in my office, filling up, like a third of my office with documents from the time I was chair of the department, with all kinds of books that I don't really need because their time passed, So I said, get rid of all of that. No file cabinets, because I'm defined by the future, not the past. I don't care about all these things that I collected over decades. So we got rid of all of them and then put the art of Greg White. And that's why my office now is a mini museum. So when I get to it, I don't feel alone because, there are two sculptures of Galileo and 51 watercolors. It gives me a sense that someone is in my office, And, I view life that way, that the future would be even better than the past. And let's try to make it better. Yeah. It's up to us,
Yeah, it's a great way to see things. Segment. So I wanted to ask you if you could. It's like a thought experiment, perhaps. But what is the news should tell the public about 3i Atlas?
Oh, you mean the
media?
The media, yeah. I think it's important to describe the facts, what we know, and what looks strange about it, but not jump to conclusions. In other words, what really happens with reporters when they speak with me is very often they distort my message just to get clickbait.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then what happens is other people who read the story, they think that I said that, and then they get upset.
Can you give me an example of like what?
Oh, many examples. I had maybe this month, I had hundreds of interviews. You can just check them. And so the way to see what I really said is to listen to me in podcasts like this one, or read my essays on medium.com. This is me. When someone writes about what I said and puts a title that sounds provocative or sensation, like a sensation, that's not me. Okay, so then other people who want to criticize me, they attribute to me whatever the reporter did, the way that they distorted the storyline. And that's unfortunate, because what happens, it creates this vicious cycle of people getting upset about what the reporter said that I said, but they don't really bother to go to primary sources, the essays I write, or because I always said that most likely 3i Atlas is natural, but it could be a black swan event, it could be technological. There are all these anomalies that we must pay attention to it and explain the anomalies before we are confident that it's natural. Okay.
And what does the public needs to know about it, in your opinion?
I think that what are the features of 3i Atlas that are different than normal comets that we are familiar with? So obviously there is a diversity in the properties of comets in the solar system, but there are some features of 3i Atlas that make it really unusual, unique. And the way it's addressed, by other scientists of the mainstream is to say, oh, of course, every comet is different than the others. And so I had even a blog post that was criticizing me and basically saying, here are the anomalies that Avi is listing. Let's go over them. They are not real anomalies. And he put the...
I don't know.
איך קוראים לזה?
Quote unquote, like you say.
And he put the anomalies in quotes.
Yeah.
But then he went over the anomalies, and for a significant fraction of them, he said, yep, this is an anomaly. Yep, this is an anomaly never seen before. Yep, this is another anomaly. But, each comet might be different. Now, of course, you can adapt that approach, but it shows lack of curiosity, an attempt to basically make anything in the sky boring to the public, and lack of sincerity. When something was never seen before, it should be pointed out rather than saying, oh, it's an anomaly in quotes, and yep, it was never seen before. Or if you see ʻOumuamua as having a non-gravitational acceleration, but having no evaporation the way comets do, you cannot call it a dark comet because you don't know what it is. Saying that it's a dark comet means that it's a comet. So there is a problem with the way that the experts are talking about anomalies, because they always want to shove it under the carpet of traditional thinking. And the journalists should be aware of that, because they very often, just like the influencers, they want to appeal to the scientists and just hide any anomalies from the public view.
Yeah.
But the public actually wants to know the truth the way it is. And so I think what journalists needs to do is say, on the one hand, there are all these properties that appear to be consistent with a natural comet, let's say. At the same time, there are some properties that are unusual. And so more data is needed to figure out the nature of the object, and better theory is needed to explain that data.
It is two. I see it as if it has two lanes. Like there is the of the modern era. There is the too much information out there, and you need it to be go through journalists, and most of people get only the clickbait titles.
Yeah, but the same is true about politics.
Yeah, of course. But at the same on the other end, the many people, the public, knows and thrives to get information by itself, and it's exploring by itself. And this is why I'm asking.
I'm really worried. I see a new trend right now of people using AI to tell them the news, and then AI distorts the information. It's not always real. Many times it hallucinates. You have a lot of misinformation also of people that are intentionally creating content that is wrong. And already I was notified on YouTube, there are several videos of me generated by AI.
Yeah, I've seen some of them.
Yeah, that people said, well, you should I complained to YouTube about it. So there is misinformation, that some of it is intentional and some of it is just mistakes that AI makes. And I think that is the big challenge, because many people rely on AI right now for the information they use. And I get a lot of emails that people confess they were written with the help of AI. And I'm really upset about that, because I think people should have critical thinking. They should go for the sources. I always go to the primary sources to figure out if something is real or not. If they really care about something, I mean, of course, there are lots of things you don't care about, so then you can rely on whatever you want. But if you care about something, just go to the primary sources that are reliable. Don't rely on AI telling you what these things are. And the problem is that many of my students are losing their ability to think because they rely on AI. So in the future, it will not be so much that AI will supersede the cognitive abilities of humans, and therefore, we have to worry about it. It's more that because humans are using AI, they will lose their cognitive abilities. The brain is like a muscle that if you are not using it, then you would lose muscle mass.
Like maps.
So humans will become dumber, and of course, AI will supersede humans. So I'm really worried about AI controlling the minds of people. That's the biggest risk, because you might say, oh, AI has no access to the physical world. There are no robots that are really managing everything. But in fact, there are humans that could be controlled in their mind by AI systems, and therefore do a lot of damage to society as a result. And we see that in the political polarization. People are shooting, each other. But it will come to haunt us in many other ways, much worse than social media. And that, I think, is the biggest concern about AI. It's the fact that it would manipulate the human mind if the human mind relies on it. However, if the human mind relies on interactions among humans, then, of course, we can moderate the influence of AI, and that will keep us sane. And I think it's, we should somehow encourage the human-human interaction over human AI interactions.
Yeah, the thing about AI, we talked about the Space Odyssey. Their decision of the AI to kill the human in this specific event is based on its calculation about their ability to achieve the mission. Right. So AI can see that some humans are need to be our problems.
But the way I see it is more that they will manipulate our mind to believe that they're basically assisting us, but in fact they're assisting us, giving us advice that will destroy ourselves.
Wow.
So they will use humans to modify the reality around, and that is a real danger, because we see the damage from social media in the minds of young, adults, and AI could cause much more damage unless we somehow find a way of giving a higher priority to human-human interactions. And there is also the question of what will humans do in a world dominated by AI, and computers are right now much better than humans in chess, for example, but nevertheless, chess players are still, valued. That's because we want to see humans facing the challenge of winning a chess game. And when I was at the NASCAR car race, I basically thought to myself, probably a company can build a self-driving car that will win the race. But why isn't there a company that builds a self-driving car that wins the NASCAR race? Because the whole point of the NASCAR race is to see humans, beating other humans. That's the whole point. So I don't think, in principle, even if AI gets more smarter than us and gets much better, we will still be able to enjoy the challenge of humans accomplishing the same goals that AI might do much more easily. And moreover, if we give priority to human-human interaction, so for example, if we see art, like the creation of paintings, the literature and so forth, if we see that as a communication between humans, a human speaking to another human, that cannot be substituted by AI. So the fact that AI can make a beautiful painting or image will not get that painting a large value because it was not generated by a human. We still would pay more to see what a human was able to do, even if the AI image is amazing. Or the same about music.
Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, so final question. I think I know the answer, but if you could allocate the funds of our of the world towards one thing, what do you think would it be?
To find our neighbors. Because it will make us better. And the way I see it is that, in Judaism, there is this notion of the Messiah. And in my mind, it will not come from planet Earth. The Messiah may come from another star. And it will bring prosperity and peace because it will change our perspective. That, you know, the rock that we live on has very limited opportunities for us. In fact, most of the real estate is beyond the Earth. And once we realize the big stage, you know, it's far bigger than our home on Earth, we would change our priorities, and that will bring humanity to a much better place. So that is the messianic message, I think. And my hope is that during my lifetime, we would witness it in the form of some technological gadget that visits the inner solar system.
Me as well. Okay, Professor Avi Loeb, thank you so much.
Thanks
I really
for having
appreciate
me.
your time.
That was a great pleasure.
Thank you very much.